lot of red wine, and even with their rich diet, they tend to live longer. The highest percentage of people living over the age of 100 in the world live in France, and they attribute a lot of that to the high proclivity of drinking red wine. And then also biotin. If you take high-dose biotin, it helps you keep your hair color, believe it or not. There are all sorts of things like this. I could do a list that would be the entire slide presentation here. The point is, this is just a sampling of what can be done naturally that even drugs cannot touch. But what's happening? Well, this is the competition. What I just showed you competes with the drug companies and competes with the pharmaceutical industry and vested interests. So you have alternative therapies that are being suppressed. For cancer, like I said before, there are only 3 legal ways to deal with it, certainly in the United States and mostly in the European Union, and that is cut, poison, or burn, radiation, chemotherapy, or surgery. Competition is banned, but how do they do it? They don't do it in the marketplace. They do it by using the government's coercive powers, by using government agencies like the Food and Drug Administration to go in and enforce the monopoly situation or position of a company, a drug company most likely in these cases, and that's where you have what I call captured agencies, although it's not my term really, I acquired it from others who preceded me, but captured agencies, when you think about it, who has the most interest in dealing with a government agency like the Food and Drug Administration? Is it you? I mean, you have your own lives to live. Maybe you work in a housing industry, or you do a job as a manager in a retail store or something like that. What is the food industry to you? It's a small percentage of your life. You have movies to go to, you have family to deal with, you have trips you make, you have to deal with the government on other levels. So you aren't going to spend a lot of your time and energy on this sort of thing. But for a drug company, that's 100% of its energy. If they don't get a drug approved, if they don't get it accepted, they're either out of business or their profits go down dramatically. That's why in the United States, the pharmaceutical industry spends $6 million a day, US, on lobbying Congress and the agencies to make sure that their interests are protected. We, the National Health Federation, we have a lobbyist in Washington, but he doesn't get paid anywhere near that. But they have enormous clout, and they tend to capture these agencies. So if you think these agencies represent your interests, you're almost always wrong. There are always going to be exceptions, and that's not to say that all the people in these agencies are bad. In fact, they are not. A lot of them are quite good and quite interested in helping people's health. It's just that the ones who really run the show are captured. And you see this, especially in the United States, with this revolving door policy that they have, where an agency chief will leave, retire, and he or she will then take a very important and high-paying position with a pharmaceutical company or some other big corporation. So, truth number 1, government agencies do not work for you. So if you think they're going to, forget it, they don't. They work for the commercial and financial interests that they are supposed to protect you against. They are a tool for eliminating competition. And the only way you can make them get off their duffs and do something is when light is shined on them and intense and persistent, sustained pressure is put upon them. Then you will see them act in the public interest, but usually then and only then. If they do act in the public interest, otherwise it's a huge mistake, or there was someone that really messed up. So then we come to Codex Alimentarius. Now in the past, you had the pharmaceutical agencies, and again I use them as the pharmaceutical industry, I use them as an example, that had to go to each country and capture the agency or spend a lot of lobbying time, money, and energy to make sure their interests were protected and the competition was eliminated. Because this is the way you do it. If you have an obsolescent business, business going out of existence, and you can't cut it in the marketplace, what do? You go running to the government. It's a centuries-old practice, and you get them to pass laws or grant you monopoly status, and then you can keep your business going. That's the way it's done. It's done in Britain, Ireland, all the Anglo-Saxon countries, and certainly in the continental countries throughout the world. So, instead of having to run around all these different countries, what can they do? They have Codex Alimentarius. The Codex Alimentarius Commission is the ultimate prize to capture. They can capture it, and if they capture it, then they don't have to go to all the extent that they had to before. It's very easy. It's centralized power. And right now, the Codex Alimentarius doesn't have the power that they would like it to, but it's headed that way. It's for those of you who don't already know, Codex Alimentarius is an international commission that was designed and created actually in the time period 1961, 1963, depending upon when you pen the exact date down, to standardize food regulations both internationally and domestically. And it's a commission that was created under the auspices of the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization, and it's jointly funded by them, mostly by the FAO, but somewhat by the WHO. And the commission itself meets every year, usually in June, July, and it alternates. It'll either meet at the FAO headquarters in Rome, or it'll meet at the WHO headquarters in Geneva. And this year, in the summer, the one I went to, it met in Rome. Next year, it will meet in Geneva. But as Ian Crane pointed out, and if you don't know who Ian Crane is, you should know. He's been a big campaigner against Codex Alimentarius and on many other issues. And by the way, he'll be speaking here in a couple of days at the Clarion Hotel on the 22nd and the 23rd of September. And there's some flyers around here. You ought to pick it up and not miss him. He's a very smart guy, and he knows what he's talking about. So I urge you to go hear him if you want to know more about Lisbon Treaty and Codex and some of the other items as well. But his point of view is that all Codex really is a template for getting in other laws and processes that will regulate all of us on a global scale, that will make the European Union look like it will be, the European Union will be to it what Ireland is to the European Union. So if you imagine the distance in dealing with these distant princes and princesses who run the European Union, think how much more difficult it will be when it's done on a global scale. So Codex Alimentarius is tied into the European Union, and the regulations that they're promulgating will affect all of you through the treaties that the European community has with the Codex Alimentarius, and also through treaties that the European Union has with other countries, where they make reference to the Codex Alimentarius guidelines and standards. And these are standards that are much harsher on most levels than what Ireland currently enjoys or was enjoying until the European Union's Food Supplements Directive was put into place. So you have a commission, which I mentioned. There's a chairman of the commission, or a chairwoman as the case may be, and there's some 27 committees beneath it. It gave birth to various numbers of committees. At present it's roughly 27 that deal with many different issues, from food hygiene to pesticides and food additives and contaminants in food, to one in particular that especially interests us, called the has this really difficult acronym, the CCNFSDU, which is the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses. And that's the one that's mostly working to suppress vitamin mineral supplements throughout the whole Codex community. Now, there's some 183 members of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Ireland is a member. But Ireland actually, when it goes to these meetings, it rarely speaks up. The reason? Because as the European Union, the EC actually, European Community Representative there, speaking up for the interests of Ireland, maybe. It's a Greek guy at one committee, it's a Greek guy, and named Matthew Dacus, and he speaks up, he lives in Brussels, and he speaks up for the European community, and maybe, excuse me, maybe it includes some of your interests, but not always. So underneath the committees, they have these working groups, and the working groups meet also. They're either physical, excuse me, they're either physical working groups or they're electronic working groups. And they're making a lot of the standards and guidelines now that then the committees adopt, and then the committees refer them up to the commission, who then will adopt them and put them in effect. So there's the building in Rome. That's the one I was at just in July. I took that picture myself. And that's where there's the UN flag flying over. It's a nice building. You can get lost in it. Actually, the FAO staff is quite nice, and they do their job pretty efficiently.